Hi, Algebra 2 students. This is Ms. Carranza, and today we're going to go over section 5.3. The notes are about how to divide functions using synthetic division. So far, we have divided functions by factoring by grouping. However, if you are given a polynomial that cannot be factored by grouping, you're going to have to use synthetic division. And that's what the new lesson is about. This method requires you to use a zero. Now, a zero is not the same as a factor. If you look at the definition of a zero of a function is any x value where the function intersects the x-axis. You write it as x equals that number. Make sure that you have all of this written down on your paper. In other classes, you'll hear the word zero replaced with the word solution. So a solution of a polynomial is also known as a zero. Sometimes people call them roots. The root of a polynomial is a zero or a solution, but zero is not the same as a factor. Okay, go ahead and make a quick sketch of the polynomial f of x equals x cubed plus x squared minus 34x plus 56. You don't have to worry about doing all these tick marks. You can just make a quick sketch of the polynomial and notice that it has 3 zeros. The zeros of this function are x equals -7, 2, and 4. As factors, those would appear as x plus 7, x minus 2, and x minus 4. So notice that these two have opposite signs. Zeros and factors have opposite signs. If you were to solve each factor and set it equal to 0, you would see y as a 0, it's -7. Right? If you set each one of these equal to 0, you don't actually have to write this if you don't want to, but it could help you when you're looking at your notes again. There's the 2, etc. So zeros have opposite signs as the factors. Take a look at the directions for number 1. It says find the division. Find f of x divided by g of x using synthetic division. Assume that g of x is a factor of f of x. So if you look at example 1, here's your polynomial. It's a cubic. It's the same cubic that I have graphed here. So technically, we already know what the factors are and what the zeros are, but we'll refer to the graph in a little bit. I'm going to show you how you can get those answers without having graph paper and using synthetic division. Okay. F of x cannot be factored by grouping. The GCF of the first two is x squared. The GCF of 34 and 56 is 2. And if you look, if you take out an x squared and a -2, this does not give you the same answer as this. So this cannot be factored by grouping. That means you're going to use synthetic division. But for synthetic division, you need to find the zero that belongs to the factor you've been given. So this is a factor. I need a 0. So I'm going to set it equal to 0, solve it. And now that you have a 0, you're ready to start synthetic division. So remember, synthetic division requires that you have a a 0, not a factor. So if they give you a factor, they told me that g of x was a factor, you're going to set it equal to 0 to convert it to a 0. All right, now the steps that I'm going to do are going to seem super weird the first time, but after you do it a few times, you'll get the hang of it. It's kind of a really weird way of dividing. I don't think you've ever done anything like this before. But I'm following these steps for synthetic division. So step 1 is to convert the factor into a 0. Done. Step 2, set up the synthetic division. Now, to do that, you need to first write down all the coefficients. So write yourself a little note. All the coefficients of your polynomial. So there's going to be a lot of writing, guys. It's very important that you guys write down all these steps if you don't have it written on your paper. All right, so I'm on step 2. Step 2 requires me to write all the coefficients. So coefficients are the numbers in front of all of your terms. So these are all my coefficients. I've got a 1, 1, negative 34, and 56. Now, notice that your highest exponent is a cubic, x to the 3rd power. So next to that should be an x squared, which we have. Next to that should be x to the 1st power. That's called a linear term. We have that. And lastly, your constant term. So cubic, quadratic, linear, and constant. If we were missing a term, so let's say we were missing the x squared, you would fill in the coefficient as 0. Okay, so remember I'm on step 2, setting up the synthetic division. So I put all the coefficients of the polynomial, and off to the left, I'm going to go ahead, and it looks kind of like a little box. You can use a full box, but I don't know why my math teacher always did just like this. We put the 0 there. Okay, leave a space under your coefficients and draw a line. Put a plus sign, and I want you to imagine that we have 4 columns. Okay, that's the setup. So in your setup, we're on step 2. You're going to put all the coefficients of your polynomial, and on the left, in like a little box, you're going to put the 0 that you were given. That x plus 7 was a factor. We set it equal to 0. We got a negative 7. You're going to leave some space at the bottom so that you can put numbers and add as we move on to step 3. You're going to bring down the first coefficient. Okay, well, my first coefficient is 1, so I'm going to bring it down. Then I'm going to multiply that by the 0 and write the product in the next column. So I'm going to multiply the 1 with a negative 7. I'm going to multiply it and put it in the next column. That's step 3. So I'm done with step 3. Now I'm going to go on to step 4. Add the numbers in the next column. Okay, 1 plus negative 7 is negative 6. And then you're going to repeat the steps. So now I'm going to go ahead, repeat the steps from the previous column. I'm going to multiply negative 7 with negative 6 and put that in the next column. So negative 7 times negative 6 is 42. And now I'm going to add the 2 terms in this column. Negative 34 plus 42 is 8. And I'm going to keep repeating the steps. So now I'm going to multiply. So I'm just going to show you. The first time we multiplied -7 with 1, and we put that in the next column. Then I multiplied the 0 with the -6, and I got 42. And now I'm going to multiply the -7 with the 8, and put that in my last column. So -7 times 8 is -56. You're going to keep repeating those steps that I showed you until you have a sum. So remember, you're going to add the last two numbers, 56 plus -56, until you get a 0. With synthetic division, for the problems we're going to do this year, your last addition, your last column should add to 0. Now, remember, we are dividing f of x by g of x. The highest exponent for x cubed, for f of x was x cubed. The highest exponent for g of x was x to the first power. When you're dividing x cubed by x to the first power, you're going to end up with x squared. So the 1, the -6, and the 8 are coefficients to a quadratic. This is 1x squared, this is 6x, -6x, and this is 8. Now, they don't really ask you to do this because technically we've already answered the question. F of x, which was x cubed plus x squared minus 34x plus 56 divided by g of x, which was x plus 7, gave us x squared minus 6x plus 8. So we've technically already done what they asked us to do. We use synthetic division. However, I do want you guys to know that some of these quadratics can be factored, and in an upcoming lesson, we're going to solve them to find the rest of the zeros, because remember, look back at the graph. This quadratic had 3 zeros, -7, +2, and +4. So besides the -7, there's two other factors here. Two other zeros. I'm going to factor this, so I'm going to look for two numbers that multiply to 8 and add to -6. That's -2 and -4. So this factors x minus 2 and x minus 4. If you notice, if I were to set these equal to 0, what would I get? If I set each of these factors equal to 0, I'd get +2 and +4. Look at the graph. Besides -7 as a 0, we also said that there was a +2 and a +4 as zeros. So that's going to be coming up in another lesson. But for this one, we're just going to practice using synthetic division. Once we obtain a quadratic, we're going to go ahead and factor it. So your solution should be factored. The answer is x minus 2 and x minus 4. Remember that you can always pause and rewind the video when necessary. This will definitely get easier the more we practice, so don't panic. Okay, number 2. Divide the polynomial by using synthetic division. Synthetic division requires you not to use a factor, but to use a 0. So set x minus 2 equal to 0, and that's the number we're going to use for synthetic division. So again, for synthetic division, you need to have a 0, not a factor. All right, let's see if you remember how to set it up. In a little box, you're going to put your 0. Then you're going to write all your coefficients. So this is cubic, quadratic, linear, and constant. Remember, if you're ever missing a term, you have to fill in a 0 for it. Then we're going to put a plus sign under your 0 and a line with some space under your coefficients. You're going to pretend that there are columns here. So this is just step 1. This is the setup. Okay. Step 2 is to bring down your first coefficient. Now we're going to start multiplying, adding, multiplying, adding. I call it ma, 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 ma. And you're going to do that until your last column has a sum of 0. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply my 0 with a number at the bottom and put it in my next column. So 2 times 1 is 2. Then I'm going to add the numbers in this column, which would be 3. That's the ma. So multiply and then add. Multiply 2 times 1, write that answer in your next column, and then add. Now I'm going to follow the same steps. 2 times 3, and put it in my next column. It's ma, 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 ma. So multiply 2 times 3, put it here, that gives you 6, and then add. Negative 10 plus 6 is negative 4. Remember, it's ma, 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 ma. So now I'm going to multiply 2 times negative 4. That gives me negative 8. And you should obtain a sum of 0 for the problems that we're doing this year. Now remember, the highest exponent of f of x was x cubed. Remember, they wanted you to divide. G of x, the highest exponent, was x to the first power. When you divide a cubic by a linear term, your answer is going to be an x squared. So these are the coefficients. This 1, 3, and negative 4 are the coefficients for a quadratic. Now, the original function, x cubed plus x squared minus 10x plus 8, was being divided by g of x, which was x minus 2. We see with synthetic division that the answer is x squared plus 3x minus 4. However, if it can be factored, I want you to factor it. What numbers multiply to negative 4 but add to 3? Negative 1 and 4. So try to leave your answer in factored form. I promise this will get easier the more that we practice. Go ahead and pause the video, rewind, rewatch it. You can send me a message. I can help you with Google Chat or Remind. But this is synthetic division. Okay, in order for me to use synthetic division, I need to write my factor as a 0. So I'm going to set x plus 5 equal to 0. Once I have my 0, I'm going to put it in a little box. I'm going to take all my coefficients. Remember, coefficients is a fancy word for the numbers multiplied in front of the variables. So I've got a 1 in front of my x cubed, a positive 7 in front of my x squared, a positive 7 in front of my x, my linear term, and a negative 15. I'm going to leave a space, put an addition under my 0, and imagine my columns. Do you remember what you're supposed to do next? Pause the video. Try to see if you can figure it out by looking at your steps that you wrote down. So I already did step 1 and step 2, so you're on step 3. Pause the video, see if you can do the next step by yourself, and then unpause the video to check your answer. Okay, so my first step was to bring down the first coefficient. Then I was supposed to do ma, 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 ma. So multiply, then add multiply, then add. 7 plus negative 10 is negative 3. Then multiply and add. Your last sum, negative 15 plus 15, should be 0. If it's not, check a few things. Make sure that you put the correct signs, positives and negatives of your coefficients. Make sure that you're using a 0 and not the plus 5 from your factor. Now remember, if you started with a cubic and you factored out by a linear term, your answer should be x squared for your coefficients. So it should be 1x squared plus 2x minus 3. If you can factor it, factor it. So take a minute and see if you can factor this. Pause the video and then unpause it to check your answer. This, in fact, can be factored to x minus 1 and x plus 3. So they asked me to divide f of x by g of x. F of x was x cubed plus 7x squared plus 7x minus 15. G of x was x plus 5. That gave me an answer of x squared plus 2x minus 3, which factored into x minus 1 and x plus 3. Okay, I want you to pause the video and try this last problem by yourself. Push play when you're ready to check your answer. Please do not cheat. Really try number 4 by yourselves before watching the video. Look back at your steps to help you remember what to do. Okay, how did you do? The answer is 5x squared minus 2x minus 7. Now this one, this quadratic trinomial, can be factored. What numbers multiply to negative 35 but add to negative 2? Positive 5 and negative 7. So you split the negative 2 into positive 5x and a negative 7x. Find the GCF of the first two terms. Find the GCF of the second two terms. Put those together in a binomial. And then the remainder should match. So 5x squared divided by 5x is 1x. 5x divided by 5x is 1. That should be the same answer as if you divide these two. So negative 7x divided by negative 7 is 1x. Negative 7 divided by negative 7 is 1. So think about what they asked us to do. They asked us to take f of x divided by g of x, which was x plus 2. Using synthetic division, we got an answer of 5x squared minus 2x minus 7, which factors to 5x minus 7 and x plus 1. If you guys need help, make sure that you ask. So today your homework was just to complete the notes. Tomorrow you will be off, so we don't have school tomorrow because it's non-attendance day for the year 2020. Some people call it Good Friday. But yes, you will have to practice this, so make sure you ask me for help if you need it. Talk to you soon.